Okay, this is every iPhone Apple... Hello, dark... Okay, this is every iPhone Apple currently sells, and a couple more. So let's see if any of them can beat the current battery life record of 8 hours and 46 minutes. Okay, there is quite a lot going on right now. So the first thing I'm trying to do is just level the playing field. So I'm using a luxometer to check that each phone is on the exact same brightness. I'm using the same settings on all the phone, Wi-Fi on, Bluetooth on, but also I'm making sure that every phone has a battery health of 100%. Because batteries degrade over time. So this is just me making sure that all the phones in this test are as good as new. So let's unplug and kick things off with a little bit of Among Us. Also, just a reminder that I am giving away 5 iPhone 12s, rules for that are in the description. Now, for me, this has probably been the most interesting battery comparison to film ever. Because if you watch the launch event of the iPhone 12s, you'll know that Apple talked about the power of the new phones, they talked about 5G quite a lot, they also talked about the cameras, but they didn't once mention battery life. So we're going in blind. But while these aren't confirmed exact figures, we do have some battery estimates for iPhone 12 and 12 Pro, and they might explain why. They suggest that you're getting smaller batteries than last year's iPhone 11 phones, by about 10%. And at the same time, these smaller batteries have actually got to power more. The iPhone 12 Pro has a bigger display than the iPhone 11 Pro, 6.1 inches versus 5.8. And the normal iPhone 12, while it has the same size screen as the iPhone 11, it has double the resolution, so more pixels to push. Smaller batteries and more power-hungry displays. It doesn't sound great for these new iPhones. And actually, even if you take a look at the current battery percentages, they're not winning. The iPhone 12 and 12 Pro, they're not doing bad, but they're quite significantly already trailing the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the smaller iPhone 11 Pro. Now, there is one important saving grace for these new phones. It's the fact that they're powered by the A14 Bionic chip. See, every year with every new device, chips get better, chips get more power efficient, they can deliver more power by using less. Which is also why it's kind of confusing that Apple still sells the iPhone XR. Because that's a phone from 2018, it's powered by a chip from 2 years ago. And from that point, the A13 Bionic is apparently 40% more power efficient than that. And the A14 Bionic is apparently 30% more power efficient than that. So the takeaways of this are that the iPhone 12s should be super efficient. And don't buy the iPhone XR. I just think in 2020, it doesn't really make sense, especially for the $500 being asked for. The iPhone 11 is way better value for money. So, battery-wise right now, we're past the 2-hour mark, but I gotta say some of these capacities are looking a little dicey. I mean, I normally say in these tests that if a phone can get to the 5-hour mark, that's good. If it can get to 6, that's great. If it can get to 7, fantastic, you're laughing. But it doesn't look like the last two phones, the iPhone XR and the iPhone SE, are gonna make it. And what makes this a little worse is that while I am trying to keep this test fairly day-to-day, I'm not running back-to-back-to-back benchmarks, it's kind of designed to slowly ramp up in intensity. So the worst is yet to come. The SE is really feeling it. We're just past 2.5 hours, but that phone is bordering on 30% battery left. I just think it's not enough capacity. Yes, iPhones are super efficient with the way they handle battery, and yes, this phone has a tiny display, but it still has a full-fat A13 Bionic chip in it, so you kind of need a bit of juice. It's kind of crazy the contrast between these phones. While the SE over there is struggling, the iPhone 11 Pro Max is just storming through. I mean, to be fair, I love the iPhone 11 Pro Max. I've been using it as my main phone for about 5 months now. It's fantastic. I've never worried about battery life, so this result makes sense to me. Now, the other thing you should probably bear in mind here is that the iPhone 11 Pro, the smaller one, even that phone is doing better than the new iPhone 12s. So it seems like the smaller battery capacity of these new phones isn't quite offset by the more efficient chipset. And you've got to also remember that these new phones are 5G phones. Now, obviously, for the sake of this comparison, I'm not using 5G, just to keep it fair. None of these phones have a SIM in them. But if you do use 5G, even with Apple's automatic battery saving 5G features, 5G is going to consume more juice than 4G. Oh, iPhone SE is dead at 3 hours 59 minutes. That's not a lot of battery life. I think that the only time the iPhone SE makes sense is if it's for someone who's a real light user of their phone. Someone who's like got an iPhone 6, an iPhone 5, and just wants an upgrade that's modern, that has a good camera, because battery life wise it's just not suited for heavy use. So out of curiosity, if this year's iPhones don't last as long as last year's iPhones, is that a deal breaker to you? Because I mean, obviously we've kind of grown to expect that every generation of phones should have at least as much battery, if not more, but given that the iPhone 11 generation was actually so good for battery life, my question to you is, does it matter? Okay, so very shortly after starting camera testing, iPhone XR's called it a day. This is a super demanding task. We're really getting to the upper echelons of this test. And you would kind of expect this result. The iPhone XR compared to the 11 is a year older, it's a year less efficient, it's got a smaller battery as well. Alright, let's start fast forwarding this test a little bit. So, iPhone 11 has just conked out. That's been a good run, just past the 5-hour mark. Good enough battery, will probably last you a couple of years, fine. The other thing I really wanted to do was to run Antutu. Now I don't want to run it again and again and again, make this like a back-to-back benchmark test, but running it once does show some interesting things. For starters, the iPhone 12s power through the test. They move through it faster than the old phones, which is good. But also all the phones, you'll notice their displays have suddenly become ultra dim. And that's actually an overheating prevention mechanism. Antutu is pushing these phones to their absolute limits, and this is their way of saying, we don't want to die. So before we carry on the test, I'm just going to quickly reboot them. If you look at battery percentages now, you'll notice two very interesting things. Firstly, that the iPhone 11 generation has pulled ahead massively compared to the iPhone 12 generation. Like, they're on about double the percentage left. And secondly, you'll notice that the iPhone 12, the non-Pro model, is actually performing slightly better than the Pro model. It's tough to say exactly why, but it could just be the fact that maybe the Pro has a bit of extra RAM and that requires more power to push. For example, it's a minor difference between the two phones, not something you would actually pick one over the other for. But also just bear in mind that we are well past the 6-hour mark, and that is what I would consider the benchmark for great battery life. And especially the fact that these are not the big phones, these are the 12 and the 12 Pro, not the 12 Pro Max, which you would expect to have better battery life. If you compare this battery life to similarly sized Android phones, it compares well. Alright, last two phones, I'm just going to fast forward this till the end and get to the results. The 11 Pro Max is such a monster. Okay, so in 7th place, this is the iPhone SE with 3 hours 59 minutes, one short of 4 hours, which still wouldn't be very good. This is not a great phone for battery, but I guess it's intended for different type of user. Then you've got the iPhone XR with 4 hours 31 minutes. That's a fair bit better than the SE, but still falls below what I would consider good battery life. And so this is not a phone I would recommend to anyone in 2020. But the iPhone 11 is a device that I would recommend. You're just getting a lot more phone compared to the iPhone XR for just $100 more. And the battery life is quite a lot better too. You're at 5 hours 8 minutes, just over the 5-hour golden mark. Then we've got the iPhone 12 Pro. And even though this is in 4th place, you've got to remember that it is a huge jump in battery life over the 11. 6 hours, 35 minutes. This might be a little bit less with 5G once you start using that, but still, this is great battery life. And then you've got the iPhone 12, lasting 6 minutes longer than the Pro. And that is not a big difference at all, but it's yet another example of how in 2020, the iPhones coming out this year, there is very little difference between the standard and the Pro model compared to past years. Okay, here's where things get a little fruity. In 2nd place is the iPhone 11 Pro with 7 hours 36 minutes. That's an hour longer than the iPhone 12 Pro. And I mean, that is well into exceptional battery life, especially for a phone this compact. If battery life is important to you, you might want to consider last year's iPhones, especially considering that they will now be cheaper. And then in 1st place, iPhone 11 Pro Max. It's a battery monster. This phone has the 2nd best ever recorded battery life of all phones I've ever tested. Second only actually to the Huawei Mate 30 Pro, which was also a ridiculous phone. I'd be really curious to see how well iPhones shape up battery-wise when Apple starts introducing 120Hz displays on them. That'll be the true test. But yeah, thanks for watching. The rules for the giveaway are in the description. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you in the next one.